Live, it's the Inside Scoop, Virginia. All the news Virginians want to know. Here's your host, political insider, George Burke.
Welcome to the Inside Scoop. Tonight we have Jody Wagner. Jody is a candidate for lieutenant governor, a Democrat. She hails from Virginia Beach. She lives there. She has 4 children. Her husband, Alan, is a physician there. But most importantly, she has a popcorn company called Jody's Popcorn. My wife's already said she's voting for it because every once in a while I bring home popcorn and my wife says it's the best popcorn she has ever tasted. Jody, welcome to the show. You're in a bit of a crowded field. As I count now, we have you hailing from Virginia Beach. We have John Bowerbank, who hails from, I think, Russell County, Virginia. Now I understand Mike Signer's entered the race. He's out of Richmond area now, but originally from up here out of Arlington. We have some guy named Savage, Rich Savage or something, who's talking about, now all these people are talking about running. They got to get their petition signed and everything else in order to become official candidates. And then there's another woman, apparently, Pat Edmondson, who's from Virginia Beach. That one always raises a little question when someone from the same community throws their hat in the ring. I always figure somebody's behind it to try to thwart the front runner, but we shall see in terms of that. Anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And you've been a candidate now for a number of months, and I've seen you up here in Northern Virginia quite frequently. I've been following your race, and you've been all over the state. It's got to be a bit grueling, but you look no worse for the wear.
Well, thanks. Actually, we've had a lot of fun. So far, it's really been enjoyable to get around and meet people all over the Commonwealth, and they're all very nice. We've got a very nice group of citizens.
I like candidates who are having fun, because it's, politics is a tough business. It keeps you running all the time. People can get nasty, and I'm glad you're having fun. First things first, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? We're introducing you, at least on this program, for the first time to our viewers.
Okay. Well,
all 3 of them. Okay.
Well, I'll be glad to. My background, George, is I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, suburb of Cleveland. Went to college at Northwestern, grad school at Vanderbilt, and then ended up in Norfolk, Virginia, where my husband did a medical residency. And we fell in love with the area, and we decided that this was a great place to raise a family. So we lived there since 1983, have had a wonderful time. Our first daughter was actually born in Tennessee. The other 3 were born in Norfolk. And we've had, I practiced law there for 20 years. Was very, very involved in the community. Started out doing a lot of United Way type of work, a lot of youth services, a lot of education. And then in 2000, I ran for Congress, and I almost won.
I remember that was quite a race.
That was fun too. That was quite an education. But 2000 was not a great year for Democrats, and so I went back to my regular life. And in 2001, when Governor Warner won, he asked me to serve as state treasurer. So I moved during the week to Richmond. My family stayed at the beach, and served as state treasurer for 4 years. And that was interesting. When I first when the governor called to ask me to serve, I said, Governor Warner, what do you want me to do? What's the most important thing to accomplish? And he said, don't lose the AAA credit rating. And at the time, we'd had it since 1938. Looked like that was an easy thing to accomplish. A few days later, the newspaper announced my appointment. I called the sitting treasurer, who graciously said, come to Richmond, I'll introduce you to your staff. Went up to Richmond, and she, at the end of the day, handed me a Bond Buyer magazine and said, you may find this article interesting. And on one of the articles said, Virginia placed on negative outlook, which began really a 2-year process of making sure that we secured and maintained Virginia's AAA credit rating. And
if I may interject, my recollection of that period of time, we had just come off of the Gilmore administration, and our finances, quite frankly, were in a shambles. They'd left the finances in a shambles within the state, and it took the governor and certainly the treasurer a couple of years to fix things, so to speak.
It was a rough time. The first year we cut budgets, a lot of state agencies, including Treasury, which I was responsible for, we cut the budgets 23%. And agencies really had to adjust, and we made a lot of creative changes, but it was not an easy time for government, just like now is not an easy time. We got through that. We maintained our AAA credit rating. At the time, it was hard to put a dollar value on why the AAA was so important. There are a few basic things. It's a good housekeeping seal of approval. It's impossible for localities to rise any higher than the state if you depend on the state for revenue. So for Fairfax, which has a AAA rating, if we had lost it, it would have adversely affected Fairfax. And then the third thing is that it is an advantage for interest rates. But it wasn't until this past year that we realized how important it was, just because it is a way that you're able to issue debt. And in 2008, when California was asking for a bailout, and the New York Port Authority had to pull a bond issue that they couldn't sell, Virginia went to the market, sold debt to build higher ed institution buildings on higher education campuses, and we did it at 4.4%, and it was oversubscribed.
And for our viewers who may not understand the bond market, bonds are critical. Bonds usually they're shovel-ready type facilities, whether it's a water treatment plant, locally anyway, whether it's a water treatment plant, a school, a firehouse, whatever it may be. In the state's case, in this, you were talking about university buildings. And there's really no other appropriate way to fund them. And with the economic conditions we're facing now, there are a lot of places that can't float bonds, as you had noted.
Well, and actually, George, something that the governor and the General Assembly considered last year, and we were able to get through with a lot of work by my team, was a bond package for about $1.8 billion to do 75 projects across the Commonwealth, a lot on university campuses like George Mason, to really jumpstart the state economy. So you're right, that being able to issue bonds is absolutely essential.
So you went through the Warner administration, and you were the treasurer, and the ship of state was righted by the end of that term, in my recollection. There were some hard decisions that had to be made, and the governor actually was able to work with the Republican legislature. Not that anyone has been able to work with him since, either there or on Capitol Hill right now. But so then what happened? There's an interesting story that I heard you tell about how you took your next job.
Oh, well, I was planning on leaving after the Warner administration and moving home. My 17-year-old son was 13, 14, and he was over it. He had, his mom had been gone all week. I'd been home on weekends. And he kept saying, can't you find something else you can do here in Hampton Roads? So I was pursuing some career opportunities, and Governor-elect Kane, called to talk to me. And when he called the House, he got Max. And they had a conversation, and I will never know from either one of them what was said. And then when I spoke to the governor, we had a long talk, and at the end of it I said, he was asking me to serve as Secretary of Finance, which is the chief financial officer for the state. And I said, well, Governor-elect, I appreciate the opportunity. I don't know that I can do it. I have some family issues that I have to deal with, but I'll get back to you. Hung up the phone, went downstairs, said to my kids, I don't know what to do. The governor-elect wants me to serve as Secretary of Finance. And Max said, oh, I think you ought to do it. And I said, what in the world happened to you? And he said, Mom, he is so cool that it'll be okay. So we talked about it some more, and ultimately I ended up serving. And he is cool, and it was okay. It was a great opportunity.
Tim Kaine is a great guy. I mean, certainly what he has been able to do politically in this state since taking office has been incredible. And we elected a president and helped elect that president here in Virginia, and much of that credit is due to Tim Kaine. It's been a rocky road for him dealing with the legislature in some instances, and certainly he has inherited some of the problems that have emanated from the whole credit crisis and the collapse of the mortgage market nationally. People don't always understand that all flows downhill, and it results in revenue losses here.
That's exactly right. In fact, we forecast revenues several times a year, and when we do it, we take the most current data on what major national firms are saying about the economy. And it has just deteriorated and deteriorated and deteriorated because of the mess. And the mess is really not only now a national mess, but a global mess. So Virginia is suffering, but we're in much better shape than a lot of states.
California among them.
I would not want to be in California.
We have a telephone call. We have folks who are obviously watching us streaming on the web tonight. We have Debbie on the phone from Virginia Beach. Debbie, you have the floor. Well, maybe she's not ready, or they're not ready in the control room. We'll come back if they are. So, anyway, you ultimately resigned from that post to run for lieutenant governor. And we have a couple of minutes before we do our first break. Oh. Do we have her on here? No, I'm not going to worry about her. They'll let us know if they have her. You ultimately decided to run for lieutenant governor. You resigned your post to run full-time. And I guess my first question to you is, why are you running? Why did you decide to run?
Well, you know, as Secretary of Finance, I had the opportunity to be part of most of the fiscal issues and decisions made by the Commonwealth. And one of the things that I worked on was something called the Best Managed State Competition. Pew Charitable Trust looks at every state in the nation and decides which are the best managed states. And as you'll recall, when Governor Warner was governor, we were selected as the best managed state. So Governor Kane asked me to work on that project. And they grade you on 4 things. And here are the 4. People, we got an A because we have a great workforce. And I'm not talking about appointeds like me or electeds. I'm talking about the day-to-day employee who just works hard, whether it's Governor Gilmore or Governor Kane. That employee is awesome. Second issue that they look at is information. And we got an A again because Virginia is transparent. You can go on the web and you can check immediately and find out exactly what your state government is doing. Third issue was finance. We got an A minus. And the reason we got the minus is because frequently our revenues are rocky and they go up and down as they are now, but our expenses continue to rise. Medicaid continues to grow, K-12 continues to grow. And they knew that that was a challenge for Virginia. But then the fourth area, which frankly I was very worried about, is infrastructure. And knowing that our roads are clogged and we have a bridge in Hampton Roads that we just closed with no hope of reopening, and we have major needs in our statewide transportation system, I thought, we are not going to get an A on this. Well, we got a B+, and that was very good, and I was thrilled to get it. But it really underscored the needs that we have in this Commonwealth. And our General Assembly has not been able to resolve those issues, but we can't give up. We have to continue to work. It's not fair to families. Here in Northern Virginia, transportation is a major challenge for everybody every day. Whether you can get home to take your child to soccer practice, whether you can even get to work in the morning.
Tell me about it.
So we've got to deal with it.
Of course, Hampton Roads is no bowl of cherries these days either. My son went to Old Dominion in Norfolk, and we found it to be a delightful city. But your traffic down there can be pretty brutal as well. We're going to get back to this in 2 minutes, and I asked Debbie to hang on, and I asked our viewers to hang on, and we shall be back with Jody Wagner, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Stay with us.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain-link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
Before terrorists steal them.
Why did we learn all this?
My mother,
My son
My sister-in-law.
were all murdered September 11th.
help protect America.
Together we can.
Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty
and justice
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone, or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, an up-to-date vaccination called the TD booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. My guest today is Jody Wagner. She's running in the June Democratic primary for Lieutenant Governor here in Virginia, here in the Commonwealth. She's been running for some months, and when we were so rudely interrupted by these commercials, we were talking about why you were running, and we talked about certainly the transportation issue, which predominantly impacts Northern Virginia and the Hampton Roads area. Although there are a few other places in the state where I've been stuck in traffic before.
I-81.
Yeah. And of course, that's the whole issue with the trucks blasting back and forth, but that's commerce. What can you do? But there were some other issues as well, I think, in terms of.
Well, the second issue, which we worked on a lot, both in the Warner administration and the Kane administration, is workforce. And it's really a broad issue, but it's three parts that I think we need to deal with. First is high school graduation rates.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia's our average is better than the nation, but nothing to write home about. We have an 81% high school graduation rate, which means that 1 out of 5 students is not graduating from high school. That's not okay. And we've got to deal with it. We've got to make education relevant. There is an example of a school in Newport News that I think has done an amazing job. It's only for at-risk kids. And in the high school, they have the community partner with them. And the community comes in and they tutor the students, or it's not really called tutoring, they mentor the students, that's a better word, on their career choice and what they can do. So, and students pick an area. So for 4 months, they may pick nursing. And they'll learn all about what nurses do. Mm-hmm. The nurse will take them to the job site. Remember, these are at-risk students that may not understand their choices. Then they may have an engineer come in and go through the same process. And they've dramatically improved their high school graduation rates, and they're going on to college. So we need to try and connect people and the school system. I think with President Obama calling for Americans to provide service to their communities, this is a great way to get everybody involved and tackle that issue.
And there is some money to deal specifically with at-risk students in the economic recovery package that Obama's supposed to sign on Tuesday. So any other particular areas of concern to you as a candidate?
Well, the second thing in education is we really have to look at career track education. Welders, plumbers, carpenters. Those are jobs that we're going to need, and we're going to need them no matter what outsourcing we do of most things. You can never outsource your plumber. So we have got to make sure we're training people in those careers, and those are great careers to make a good living. And then the third thing is that we're not turning out enough engineers, scientists, IT professionals that stay right here in Virginia. We graduate a lot of them, but a lot of them go back to their home country. And we need to make sure that we entice students at a very young age to be excited about science, technology, engineering, and get them into those professions early. When my kids, we have 4 kids. The first 2 went through their school system. We didn't do anything particularly creative. By the time the 3rd child was in elementary school, we decided that we needed a science professional to go in and work with the kids. And this wonderful teacher named Janet Holden went into the school system, and she went from class to class teaching science and getting them excited, and they did NASA competitions and robotics competitions. When Lizzie graduated, my 3rd child, she went on to become an engineer, as did most of her classmates. They're doing engineering, science, and technology. So I'm convinced that the teachers that are excited about the subject at a young age can make a difference.
That's an interesting concept. That's very impressive. Poor Debbie's been waiting for 12 minutes. Of course, she stood us up the first time. So let's see whether we can get her on the phone this time. Debbie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Feel free with your question.
Hi, Jody, I would like to know how you're involved in the community outside of politics.
She wants to know, just to repeat the question, how you're involved in the community beyond the political arena.
Well, Debbie, prior to becoming treasurer, I was very involved in the community, served on several nonprofit boards, both in education areas, in arts areas, and in social service areas. Since becoming treasurer and then secretary of finance, I've had to step back from a lot of that because I was in Richmond, not Hampton Roads. But I still serve on the Norfolk Foundation, which is a community foundation, and that foundation gives grants to programs all over the Hampton Roads area. And I'm still very involved in different educational endeavors because I think that's the future.
Thank you, Debbie. Let's talk a little bit about vision. You've told us about some of the issues. Let me frame the lieutenant governor's job first. I think the most important official duty that the lieutenant governor has is to preside over the Senate and in the event of a tie, break the tie, number one. It's also in many ways it's ceremonial. You represent the governor at different things, you do different things. Depending on who the governor is, you have a relationship with the governor and you are a partner of sorts on many issues, certainly as Tim Kaine was with Mark Warner. But it's also a bully pulpit. And to be a little facetious, it's also often a stepping stone to the governor's position, as we saw with Tim Kaine. How would you use it?
Well, I think first of all, for me, it would be a full-time job. I'm not planning on doing any other career besides lieutenant governor. And I'm hoping that the person that wins for governor will be willing to work closely with me and let me participate. Because having served for 7 years in the Warner and Kaine administrations, I think I've got a lot of history and a lot of knowledge that I can add to the equation.
And there's something to be said for institutional knowledge and experience.
Well, thank you. But then in addition to that, I intend to really push connecting schools with the community, the project that I talked to you about before. And I intend to work on economic development. You know, Virginia is going to struggle like the nation for the next few years. And we need to make sure that we are enticing businesses to the area, that we're marketing Virginia outside of the area. And I think I can be a great spokesman for Virginia. Because ultimately, we need jobs, good paying jobs, to come to Virginia. Northern Virginia is in relatively good shape still. But the rest of the state is beginning to hurt, and we're going to have to work very hard, and hopefully Northern Virginia won't need a lot of help, but if they do, I'd like to be there to help Northern Virginia too.
Well, you know, the general sentiment in Northern Virginia, I think, is that we understand we're all part of the Commonwealth, and we understand if there's another portion of the state that's not doing well, it ultimately will impact us as well. Whether it's in terms of taxes or whatever it may be. But overall, commerce, it's all interconnected. What about the port? What about Hampton Roads? I mean, obviously you've lived there for a while, so you understand the importance of that port. What do we need to do down there? Anything in particular?
Well, I mean, the port is probably one of the two big economic development assets that we have. One is Dulles Airport, and the other is the port. And the port has continued to grow in tonnage every year. This year it's taking a step back as a result of the problems that we're seeing in the economy. Ultimately, the port will continue to grow, but we're competing. We're competing with New York, we're competing with Charleston, with Savannah, and we need to make sure that we are in a position where we can offer the kind of service, and our service is exemplary. We really do a good job, but we have to continue to offer good service. And we have to be able to get the product out, off the ships and onto trains and trucks and to the ultimate destination. And right now, the transportation issue is making it very hard to guarantee that that product will it'll get off the ship, but then the question is, how do you get it moved further west in the United States?
And to get it moved there efficiently.
Efficiently. So we've got to solve the transportation issue for a lot of reasons, but one of them is clearly commerce and to support the port.
Todd from Fairfax is on the phone. Todd, the floor is yours.
Yes, I wanted to ask Jody about endorsements and what endorsements have you received and how do endorsements help?
Well, Todd, let me start with the help and then talk about which ones I've received. I believe that in a general election, maybe endorsements, and if a Democrat endorses a Democrat, I think the voter may say, gee, that person really didn't have much of a choice. That's a Democrat, they had to do it. But in a primary, that isn't the case. And hopefully primary voters will look to the people that have endorsed to say, you know, in a field of 5 people, who's the most qualified to serve. I have been very fortunate. You know, I spent 7 years in Richmond working with General Assembly members, and I'm honored to say that 40 of them have endorsed me. I've only asked Democratic delegates and senators to endorse at this point. So 40 out of 67 Democratic delegates and senators have endorsed my candidacy. And then on a local level, we have reached out to mayors and other local electeds to get their support. In Hampton Roads, I have the support of the mayors of Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Portsmouth, Suffolk, I'm missing one, Hampton, and Newport News. In Northern Virginia, I've gotten the support of almost all of the Alexandria Board and the mayor of Alexandria, a majority of the Fairfax Board, and Sharon Bulova, the new chair in Fairfax, and almost all of the Arlington Board and the chair in Arlington. And then a variety of other county and city officials throughout the Commonwealth, as well as constitutional officers. A lot of sheriffs are supporting me, a lot of commissioners of revenue, treasurers are supporting me. So I'm very pleased with the reception that my candidacy has received, and I'm hoping that voters look at that and say, if that many people support Jody, she must be the best candidate to challenge Bill Bolling in November.
That's an impressive number. And it does make a difference in a primary, because a primary has a smaller group of voters. They will be Democrats, a few people bleed over. And I think you're right. I think they do pay attention to endorsements because they are activists, and the people who do the endorsing are activists as well. We're going to be back in 2 minutes. Please hang with us. We can continue to take your phone calls, but stay with us. We'll be back with Jody Wagner.
This is firstgov.gov, where we're obsessed with getting you government information.
Brand new student loan applications on the site, baby. This calls for a celebration. Here's your uncle.
So in the end, it was either take the astronaut gig or come work here. What can I say? Duty called.
Dude, that's my cop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure that's Sam's cop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. Sam's. No.
Just log on or email us and get what you need.
C, change of address form. That's how it's done.
D, driver's license renewal.
E, emailing Social Security information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice, we'll allow it. All right, What are those?
Government surplus cars for auction.
You posted those online last time.
No, you did.
I'm posting them online this time!
For all your government information, firstgov.gov.
Oh, what have we got here? Sometimes you feel tired. You can't seem to lose those extra pounds off your midsection. And your joints hurt when you take the stairs? Well, you're getting older. But I'm happy to say that there's some simple things we can do to keep you happy and healthy for years to come. We can also lower your risk for some serious diseases the older population is often subject to. Proper nutrition is more important than ever. Your body has changed, not as many treats. A basic exercise plan, lots of walks and fresh air, and most importantly, come and see me for twice-yearly checkups to help ensure the best possible quality of life. Now, how does that sound? Good boy.
Improve the quality of life for your elderly pet.
Schedule twice yearly checkups that include preventive care and regular lab work. A message from the veterinary members of the American Animal Hospital Association.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. I like that little Uncle Sam intro you guys put on in the control room that time. My guest today is Jody Wagner from Virginia Beach, former treasurer, former secretary of finance for the Commonwealth of Virginia. She is running for lieutenant governor in the Democratic primary, which is June 9th. I keep thinking 10th. It was 10th last year. June 9th. There are several other candidates in the race, and I'm sure some of them will end up on this show over the course of the spring. But today the topic is Jody. Welcome back. We were talking about economic development and ports. Let's get right down to, well, first of all, I want to talk about jobs, but we have a phone call on, and I hate to keep these people waiting too long. We have Barbara from Herndon. Barbara, the floor is yours.
Ms. Wagner, you seem to have a strong background in matters of finance. Is it feasible for the state to put together some sort of fiscal stimulus package or project?
Let me repeat that question both for Jody and for our viewers. Barbara's asking, is it feasible for the state to put together an economic stimulus package, I presume similar to what was passed by the Congress and is expected to be signed next week by President Obama? The first thing I would point out is something that Congressman Connolly points out all the time. The federal government can print money. The states and localities cannot. You have to balance your budget every year.
I know, and that is a definite disadvantage for a state, but it's in the Virginia Constitution. In fact, if there's one thing that you have to do as Secretary of Finance and as Treasurer is make sure that you don't overspend every year, because you have to balance the budget. In fact, we have agencies have to certify that they have met their budget, that they haven't overspent. So we can't do excess spending in that way. What we could do, and what we did do, is do construction projects and different things that you can borrow tax-exempt funding for in order to get projects going. And when we pushed the bond package in 2008, the reason that we pushed it, it was really as a stimulus package. In fact, it even had an emergency clause so that we could get those projects moving as quickly as possible and not wait until the legislation was officially adopted or effective on July 1st. Those projects, some of them were shovel-ready, some weren't, but now they're getting to that point. They've gone through architectural drawings, they're beginning to be bid, so we're going to start seeing some spin-off from that happening. The transportation projects, when the stimulus money shows up in Virginia, we can get some shovel-ready projects moving in transportation. The federal money that's going to come to Virginia will help us in making sure that we don't have to give up some of the things that we thought we were going to have to give up. It'll help us with Medicaid so that we can meet those needs. It'll help us with education. And that's very exciting because the federal government, by printing money, can do something that we can't do.
And of course, many of the things the federal government is helping to pay for are mandates that the federal government puts in place in the first place and sometimes doesn't always pay for them.
That's exactly right.
While we're on this, the governor is supposed to issue new revenue projections tomorrow. And of course, you're not expected to know what that is at this point since you're not doing that anymore, but you were clearly involved in the past in developing these revenue projections. And I can only presume from everything I've heard coming out of Richmond, it's going to be a little gloomier than even we expected, and that's not surprising because the economy continues to tank, and hopefully this federal stimulus plan is going to at least sort of bring the ship to an even keel because it keeps listing at this point. I think it's going to be some time before we see definitive positive change. I don't think we've seen the end of this cycle at this point. What do you think he's going to say? And again, I don't want to ask you to chapter and verse because you clearly, who knows until he says it. But
well, what you have to understand, George, is the way the forecasting process is done is we take indicators, things like how, what percentage of national growth do we expect, or or losses at this point. Where's the stock market? You know, when people pay in their non-withholding taxes, those are taxes that are normally paid based on capital gains. Well, if they're not having gains and they're having losses, then that affects what they're going to pay. And then you take into effect or into account the results of taxes collected to date. And unfortunately, January's revenues were disappointing. We had forecast, or not we because I wasn't there, but they had forecast about a 4.8% drop, and we ended up with a 5.5% drop year to date. So that has to be accounted for, and that is a pretty clear indicator that the governor will have to bring down the revenue forecast further.
Well, we hope things start turning around, not only for our governor and our Commonwealth, but for a lot of states. We're starting to see here in Northern Virginia, across other parts of the Commonwealth who've seen it for some time, factories closing down, people losing their jobs. If they're able to get another job, and many of them are not, they tend to be lower paying jobs. Their income has declined. The unemployment rolls continue to grow. Again, I don't think it's quite as bad in the Commonwealth of Virginia as it has been in some other states, but nonetheless it is certainly alarming. And now even here in Northern Virginia, which is viewed as being somewhat immune to some of this, we don't have any manufacturing. Much of our industry is derived from what goes on in the federal government, their consultants and the like. We're even starting to feel the pinch up here. How would you deal with that? You know, where would you look to go in terms of economic development and jobs?
Well, you know, in Northern Virginia really is going to have to be the lead on this. You have a great workforce up here. The citizens are very bright, they're very flexible. You know, when we had the dot-com bust, they immediately transformed themselves into doing Homeland Security and attacking that. I'm convinced that the next big growth area is going to be green energy. And we have the brain power in Northern Virginia and in our universities to really make a difference. And in order to seize that and to make it happen in Virginia and not in California or somewhere else, the state is going to have to put some muscle behind it and really encourage these businesses. You know, one of the things I worry about, before I became involved in government, I was a corporate lawyer and I did a lot of work with venture companies. And what happens in downturns is that venture companies have to shelter or have to keep their money and use it to fund the existing companies that they have. They can't take the current group of clients that they have, they're already invested in, and spin them off and do IPOs because there's no market. So they have to keep, you know, those solvent and continue to put their money there, and they don't have funds to put into new companies. So something that we really need to think about is whether Virginia should have a role in trying to help seed capital some of these green energy companies. Several of the states around us do that. Maryland has several growth funds that they do to help start up businesses, and it may be time for Virginia to participate in that to help get those companies going. We've got great stuff happening at our universities. In fact, ODU has an algae project where they're growing algae and they're turning it into oil. Tech has some very interesting endeavors that they're doing. There's a consortium that's looking at wind power off the coast. So there are things that can be done, but they all take money.
We have Mary from Florida who actually lives up here and is a producer up here for our program. And she is asking if the Dillon rule adversely affects Virginia. And she asked that online. What do you think?
Well, first let's explain to your viewers what the Dillon rule is. A simple version, and correct me if you have a different understanding, is that localities really can't do anything without permission from the General Assembly.
Correct.
So the question is, should localities have more flexibility? I think before you can make it, initially your sort of reaction would be, well, of course they should. But there's a reason that there's a Dillon rule, and that's that when businesses deal with Virginia, they know that they can come into Virginia and they can work in Fairfax, and they can work in Virginia Beach, and they can work in Russell County. And no matter where they're working, the same rules apply. So we have to be careful that we don't upset that, because that's a real advantage. We weren't selected as best managed state 3 times in a row just because. We were selected because of the climate that we have, and that is one of the things that adds to that climate. I believe that we need to have a serious conversation about which things ought to be self-controlled within a locality and which things need to be controlled by the General Assembly. And I think there are certain things that we can certainly say localities should have more flexibility on, and we ought to deal with those, but we shouldn't throw out the Dillon Rule completely.
It's my understanding also is that cities have a little more flexibility sometimes under the Dillon Rule than counties, because I've heard Fairfax County howl sometimes about things that they wanted to do, and they were hamstrung, while a Virginia Beach or an Alexandria or even a smaller city could do them. So that's part of it. And I hope that answered Mary's question. Let's go back to green jobs. The beauty of green jobs is, and certainly up here in Northern Virginia, we've already started doing some things. In Fairfax County, for example, many of the buildings, anything they build now, they just build a green firehouse, and they're pushing for green type of buildings. But is it not true that green jobs don't all end up here, that they could be spread around the state? And I wanted to get your take about some of the areas within our Commonwealth that don't have some of the advantages we may have here in Northern Virginia.
Well, I think we need to be looking at manufacturing opportunities in South Side and Southwest, because that's where we have workers that have been displaced. They used to be textile workers or tobacco farmers, and they're struggling. And we need to continue to try and build up opportunities for them, which ultimately will help the whole Commonwealth. I believe that things like wind power have a future, and we should be looking to do a lot of the manufacturing of those kinds of endeavors in South Side and Southwest, so that we can put those people to work and give them an opportunity to thrive and to do new things. And I see wind power as being very important, not just in Virginia, but being important nationwide. Ultimately, we have got to get off of foreign oil. I mean, if we didn't learn anything over the past 8 years, we should have learned that we cannot be dependent on the Mideast.
If we didn't learn it in the last year and a half, when gas prices soared to about $4 a gallon, they're going back up to about $2 now. I'm looking at it every day. We have another call. We have Jenny from Mount Vernon on the phone. Jenny, the floor is yours.
I want to know what differentiates Jody from the other 4 candidates in the race. There are 5 of you. Why should we vote for you?
That's fair.
Okay.
You've got a minute to answer, so we'll carry it over to the next segment if that isn't enough time.
Okay, well, I think first of all, I am the person in this race that has spent 7 years working in both the Warner and Kane administrations and being very involved in the fiscal management of the state. And as we head into the next 2 or 3 years, we know that we are headed towards a very difficult time in Virginia. It is not, I'd love to believe that by July of next year we're going to be in great shape, but I don't believe the nation's going to be in great shape. So we're going to need somebody sitting in the lieutenant governor's seat voting on, breaking ties, that understands the budget in Virginia and the fiscal issues facing Virginia.
I want to get back a little bit more. I'm going to ask you the same question again when we return from the break. Stay with us. My guest today is Jody Wagner, Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor. She's been stumping the state for several months at least, and I think it's even been longer than that. We'll be back in 2 minutes, and we'll have more questions for her.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing. No. Of 127 consecutive.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. My guest today is Jody Wagner, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. The primary is June 9th. Jody hails from Virginia Beach. She served in both the Warner and Kane administrations, as was discussed earlier. Let's go back to distinguish yourself for us even further, and I know you had a little time beforehand, between you and the other candidates, both the Democrats. I believe there are 3 other Democrats who are in the race. 4 now. And then, of course, whoever wins that will face Bill Bowling, who apparently is not going to have any opposition, at least it appears that.
Actually, he has a challenger.
Okay,
but they're going to do it in a convention.
Well, so that means they'll do their smoke-filled room, and Bill Bowling will emerge as the victor, although I think he's eminently beatable. So distinguish yourself. You can choose, certainly distinguish yourself between the other Democrats running, and that, we're not going to disparage any of them, but feel free to distinguish yourself via Bill Bowling as well.
Okay, well, I think one difference between me and most of the other candidates is that I've also been a small business owner. And at the beginning of the show, you talked about popcorn. Well, several years ago, my husband and I started a small gourmet popcorn company. And we're based in Virginia Beach. If you know where the Hilton Hotel is in Virginia Beach, right at the oceanfront, we have a store right across from that, another store about 10 blocks south. And then we have a production facility where we actually manufacture and bag it and ship it to stores all over the East Coast. And in that, as a small business owner, I have really experienced some of the same frustrations that most business people experience. I've been furious with the state at times. I've been furious with my own locality because of some of the things, the frustrations and the paperwork that I'm faced with, rather. And I understand some of the challenges that businesses are dealing with. Paying for health care is a huge problem. And frankly, my husband and I put in money every month to make sure that we are able to help pay for the health care of our employees. But not every business can afford to do that. And I think we need to work hard to try and make sure that small businesses like mine have an environment that they can thrive in. And I know what we're going through right now in this economic climate. I know that a lot of the other businesses are challenged. In our area, we have several stores that have shut down between December and February, and have shut down completely and have gone out of business, that have been there for 20 years. So it's a very tough time, and I think that we need somebody in Richmond who understands that and understands the plight of both the workers and the people that are running the businesses. I think another difference between me and most of my opponents is I have 4 kids, and my oldest is 27. She's on her own. She's not living in Virginia. I wish she was. I'm hoping that someday we'll entice her back to Virginia. My youngest is 17. He still has to get admitted to college. So I'm seeing all of the same struggles that parents are seeing of their children finding a good job in today's climate, getting into college, paying for college, we have parents that are struggling just to make ends meet so that their students can go to college. And we need to work on making college more affordable and making financial aid more prevalent. So I think that because of my personal experiences, I bring a different angle to the job than some of the candidates do. And then finally, I think that if you look at my experience as a lawyer, that's a benefit too, because things move very fast in the General Assembly. And if you are serving as the tiebreaker, you need to bring both your knowledge of being able to read a bill and your experience of having been in state government to the table so that you can break ties. The tie has to be broken right then. You don't say, well, let me go read up on this and I'll get back to you. So you have to have some knowledge and experience to do that.
We have several bloggers who are in our control room tonight, and they're watching, and one of them poked his head in the door during the break and said, we've heard about your experience in the two administrations, and now, of course, we've heard about a wide array of other experience. He said his question was, name one specific policy that you have promoted. Now, I understand that when you're a treasurer and you're a chief financial officer, you're really not in the policy business. You're not in the business of promoting them. But let's see what the answer, how you answer this question.
Well, yes and no. I mean, actually, George, if I had to say one thing that I feel most proud about in my term in state government, it was that last spring when the Senate and the House were both, the governor, let me back up, the governor put forth a package of projects that we wanted to do as the higher education bond issue. And we picked those projects very carefully. We picked things that were going to help fulfill workforce needs for the future for Virginia, like 3 schools of medicine, one in Hampton Roads, one in Roanoke, and one in Richmond. Like schools of nursing, projects on George Mason's campus, research facilities. In fact, there's one going up at George Mason. So we picked these projects very carefully, and we had a rationale for what we were doing and thought it made a lot of sense because we were helping make the Commonwealth ready for the next 10 and 20 years. Well, after we put the bill in, the House decided that they didn't like our bill and they drafted their own bill. The Senate decided they didn't like our bill and they drafted their own bill. And each passed their own version, crossed over to the other houses. They couldn't get along. They could not agree on what to do. And when at the end of the session, they both adjourned and said, well, we'll deal with this in 6 weeks. And there was no bill that had passed. So Governor Kane called the chairman of House Appropriations, which was responsible for the bill there, and Senate Finance, Chuck Colgan from up here, and said, why don't you let Jody and her team work with you to try and resolve it? And the one thing that I think I am most comfortable with about my experience is that I am very, very good at working with both sides of the aisle. And we worked through for several weeks with the staff and then with the delegates and senators to come up with a package that the Senate and the House agreed to, and it passed unanimously. And that's the, if you will, the Jumpstart bill we were just talking about. So I think if, in terms of, while that isn't a policy, in terms of really making a difference in Virginia, I think that's going to make a difference for a long time, and I'm very proud of it.
We have about 4 minutes left, and I'm going to give you a big chunk of that time. I try to do this with every candidate who comes on the show. Instead, you're not going to be talking to me now. You're going to talk right to the viewers, if you would like, and just talk to them. Tell them why they should support you. Whatever you, the camera and the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Virginians. I would love to serve as your lieutenant governor, and I think that I can make a big difference for you and will work full-time for you in that capacity. Let me give you a sense of what I really think is important to Virginia and what I intend to push for. First and foremost, we have got to deal with the transportation issues. And we have tried. When I was treasurer in 2002, I worked with Governor Warner and tried to solve it in 2002. We didn't get it done, but we tried. In 2006, 2007, and 2008, the Kane administration tried to get it done. And at each turn, we ran into problems with the legislature, and then ultimately we got something through the legislature and it didn't pass muster with the Supreme Court. So it'd be very easy to give up on that. But if we give up on that, I'm convinced we're giving up on Virginia. Because long term, Northern Virginia cannot survive unless we have more public transportation and unless we work very hard to solve some of the gridlock. People won't continue to want to put businesses up here, and people won't want to live up here. And this is a great part of the state. You've got a lot of opportunity, but we have to make sure that we can continue to feed the needs of this population. And one of the major needs right now is transportation. One project that I worked on very closely for when I was treasurer, and then less closely as Secretary of Finance, was the rail to Dulles Airport. And that will make a big difference. That is the kind of construction, the kind of change that we need to do. We need to do it statewide. We need to make sure that when gas goes to $4, we have public transportation available for everyone to use. The second thing is we've got to work on economic development. Jobs are going to be a challenge, and we need quality jobs. We don't need jobs that are paying minimum wage. While that's better than nothing, we need to be inducing companies to move to Virginia and to grow their businesses in Virginia so that we can make an environment where your family and my family are going to want to live. I am convinced that Virginia is a great state. It's a beautiful state. We have a lot of opportunity. But we have to work together to make sure that we have a business-friendly climate so that we maintain our position as a best-managed state, a best state to do business in, and probably the accolade that means the most, the best state in which to have a child. So ultimately, when you select a lieutenant governor, you need to select someone that you think is going to work for you to try and make Virginia continue to grow. And on that note, I would very, very much like your support. I do have a primary on June 9th, and I'm going to ask you to do 3 things for me. The first is, if you're going to vote for me, please go to the polls. If you're not going to vote for me, you can make your own decision what you do that day. Second, if you feel strongly and you support my campaign, please go to my website, which is jodyforva.com. It's jodyforva.com, and sign up as a grassroots endorser. We have over 700 people that have signed up to support the campaign, not just the elected officials that we talked about earlier, but people like you that are equally important to me have signed up as endorsers. And third, if you believe in my campaign and you believe in me, tell a friend. So thank you very much.
That was great. It was a pleasure to have you. We'll have to do it again before this is over. I wish we had another hour, but we don't. But I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
In June.
Thank you very much. Good night, Virginians.